Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into it, unpacking the sources on social life, entertainment, leisure in Arad, Romania, during a really turbulent time, the interwar period, the 1920s and 30s.
Yeah, it's a fascinating, if quite difficult story.
Our goal isn't just like listing facts. We want to understand how this city's daily life, its industry, its whole vibe really, got completely dismantled after World War I. And then how it was painstakingly rebuilt.
That's exactly it. The sources paint Arad as this almost textbook case of post-imperial trauma. Before the war, apparently quite vibrant, effervescent is the word used.
Effervescent, right?
And boom, overnight almost. After the Treaty of Trianon, the city shifts from being part of dualist Hungary to Romania. And this change just paralyzes it.
So we're tracking that journey back, looking at the forces, internal and external, that reshaped everything.
Precisely. How people lived, worked, where they met, who they even were, in a sense.
And that initial feeling, it sounds incredibly bleak. The sources mention this sense of it being like a depressing illness for the community.
Yeah, a physical shock almost. One source talks about the country being, quote, mutilated. That's strong language. It wasn't just lines on a map changing.
That sense of paralysis seems key. So we need to start with how these huge geopolitical shifts actually played out on the ground, right? Yeah. The immediate chaos.
Exactly. Let's unpack that initial fragmentation. It wasn't abstract at all.
Okay, let's do it. The sources say the new border, the Hungarian-Romanian one, it just carved through existing communities, no regard for natural lines or old administrative zones.
Not at all.
He says 50 communes and the lands of nearly 600 owners were literally split. Places like Nadlag, Grandisari, they suddenly found themselves on the frontier.
And think about the smaller places like Elek or Almaskamaras. Their fate wasn't decided in Paris or Bucharest initially. It was a joint border commission, actually listening to requests from the locals.
What does that tell us?
Well, the source is pretty clear here. For the rural folk, land was everything. Livelihood, inheritance, identity. The need to keep their farms intact often trumped national feeling. They cared more about their patch of earth than the flag above it, basically.
That's a powerful insight. And while these borders are being drawn, the city itself is dealing with, well, everything else falling apart.
Oh, absolutely. A socio-health crisis on top of the economic mess. Inflation was already bad. Then the Spanish flu hits.
Made worse by soldiers returning home carrying all sorts of diseases.
Exactly. And the basic infrastructure just couldn't cope.
The human cost sounds immense. It wasn't just sickness.
No, the whole social fabric starts to fray. You've got families suddenly without support, loads of half-orphan kids. And because men were away at the front for so long, a big spike in children born out of wedlock.
Which, given the moral standards back then,
caused huge problems, yeah. Massive integration issues. So you have moral confusion layered onto physical hardship. It's just a mess.
And then the administrative earthquake. Switching empires. From Hungary's system to Romania's. How did the sources describe that confusion?
Utter dislocation. The Hungarian system had been, more decentralized. Romania's was highly centralized. Overnight, the whole legal and administrative world tilted.
And people had to swear allegiance.
Right. To keep your public office job, you had to swear allegiance to the Romanian state. Many refused. So suddenly there were these huge gaps in expertise and basic functioning.
Which the state tried to fill by bringing in civil servants from other parts of Romania.
Exactly. Massive relocation from beyond the Carpathians. But these new officials, they brought different customs, different ways of doing things, different legal knowledge.
So you had old laws still technically enforced, new laws coming in. Must have been chaotic.
Total confusion in daily governance. And you see it in the tiny details. The sources mentioned for years they were still using old Hungarian postage stamps, just overprinted with Kingdom of Romania, because they just didn't have the new ones or the system wasn't ready. That little stamp tells you so much about the struggle to change an empire overnight.
That administrative chaos, it obviously led to bigger systemic changes.
Yeah.
Like who actually held the jobs in public office.
Yeah.
The ethnic shift sounds dramatic.
It was, and deliberate. Look at the numbers. 1919, Arad's public offices were somewhat mixed. 32 Romanian staff, 25 Hungarian, 10 German, 2 Jewish.
Okay.
Fast forward maybe 15, 20 years, totally different picture. 48 Romanian, only 8 Hungarian, 3 German.
So Romanian staff up by 50%, Hungarian staff down by nearly 70%. That's huge.
Yeah.
What was the real impact of that?
2 main things, I think. First, a massive loss of institutional memory. Decades of local know-how just vanished.
Right.
Second, the new administration clearly prioritized national loyalty. which probably meant language barriers, maybe favoritism.
Hmm.
It changed the whole relationship between the state and the people.
And this wasn't just bureaucracy. It hit the economy hard, too. Rail transport, for instance. The CFR Romanian Railways was seen as vital, like a third army.
And it suddenly faced this almost irrecoverable shortage of skilled workers, because many of the previous specialists were Hungarian or German.
So what happened to those people who lost their jobs? The
Yeah.
skilled workers, the old elites.
They had a pretty stark choice, according to the sources. Emigrate, often to America, or repatriate to what was left of Hungary.
Repatriate, moving to Hungary.
Well, yeah. The estimate is around 12,000 people moved from the Arad area to Hungary in this period. Think about that brain drain, that loss of dynamism for the city.
Meanwhile, the state's using economic levers, too, replacing the currency, the koruna, with the Romanian leu in 1920. That must have been a shock.
A massive shock. Inflation had already eroded savings. Then the currency switch basically wiped out much of the remaining wealth, especially for the old elite.
And then land reform in 1921.
Yes, and it wasn't neutral. It disproportionately hit the largest states owned by Hungarians. It was a deliberate strategy to shift economic power and land ownership.
So financial shocks, land redistribution, and then the law targets identity itself.
Yeah.
The 1924 citizenship law.
Right. This one was tricky. It tied citizenship to having lived there uninterrupted for 4 years.
What made that so difficult?
It was retrospective, and the bureaucracy was immense. You needed proof of continuous residence, a clean record. After years of war, shifting borders, administrative chaos, for hundreds of people, maybe thousands, getting that paperwork was impossible.
So even long-term residents ended up in limbo.
Exactly. Stateless, essentially, or with unresolved status, well into the 1930s. Imagine trying to run a business or raise a family with that uncertainty hanging over you.
Let's look at industry. Arad was known for its factories. Astra, the big wagon factory, formerly by Tsurianos, they were worried about being moved.
Definitely. Especially after another big local factory, Marta, which made aircraft, was relocated to Braiov in 1925. That sent a chill through Astra.
And they faced criticism, too.
Constant pressure from Bucharest about not having enough Romanian specialists. It's that same nationalist pressure we saw in the civil service. It directly led to the boss, Vigyaso Laszlo, resigning in 1932. The message was clear: get with the national program, or else.
But the Newman family, they managed to hold on to their industrial empire. Textiles, spirits, the mill, Indegraia.
That's an interesting contrast.
It is. Baron Caroly Neumann seems to have understood something crucial. To keep his factories running, he needed his skilled workforce. And in this unstable climate, he had to give them a reason to stay.
So he built housing.
Yes, the colony.
Yeah.
A complex of modern buildings designed by the architect Sante Lagos, providing good homes for his key professionals. The source calls it a national first.
So it wasn't just generosity.
Probably not just. It was smart business. A way to retain talent when everyone else was potentially leaving. Using infrastructure to stabilize society, in a way.
Which brings us to culture.
The new regime wasn't just changing jobs and money. They were trying to erase the past from public view. Symbolically, yeah. The removal of Hungarian statues, that must have hit hard emotionally. Between 1921 and 25, they fenced off and then demolished the big Kossuth statue and the Statue of Liberty.
Icons of the city's past.
Exactly. For people who grew up with those landmarks, it was like tearing down their shared history. Very bitter. And what replaced them? Busts of Romanian intellectuals and something called the Rafiorou Cross, remembering ethnic clashes from 1918.
A very clear message.
Dominance and replacement, written in stone and bronze.
How did the Hungarian community react to that? To this attempt to erase their identity?
They organized. They tried to preserve their cultural life. The Hungarian National Party, the OMP, was founded in 22. Their leader, Dr. Krener Miklos, advocated for integration, but without giving up their national identity.
And cultural groups became important.
Hugely important, like sanctuaries. The
Yeah.
Kulksi Association focused on Hungarian language and culture. Astraea promoted Romanian culture. So you had these parallel efforts. And crucially, the Minorities Cultural House opened in 1927. That became the main hub for Hungarian events.
But just as things maybe started to stabilize a bit, nature intervened. The Great Flood of 1932.
Yeah, another massive blow. The Murray and Carel rivers flooded catastrophically, destroyed huge amounts of farmland, 36,000 hectares, made over 400 houses unlivable, affected thousands of people.
And showed the old infrastructure wasn't up to scratch.
Totally inadequate. The
Yeah.
dam system from 1880 just couldn't handle it. A stark reminder that even if politics settled down, basic safety wasn't guaranteed.
So it really wasn't until the mid-1930s, like a decade and a half after the war, that social life properly recovered.
That seems to be the timeline, yeah. And the recovery was built on organization, structure,
Professional groups popping up?
dozens of them. Chambers of commerce, labor, agriculture, associations for doctors, lawyers, you name it. These ran alongside the older established social clubs, the Catholic Circle, the Lloyd Society, the Rotary Club. These were vital for social connection in a city still quite divided.
And where do they all meet? The famous Arad Cafe culture must have come back.
Oh, absolutely. The Desha Cafe was a constant. The Vadaskert became the spot for Romanian intellectuals. If you were visiting from the countryside, you'd head to the Thicate Marani wine cellar, good value. And the pastry shops, like Königsborfer, were key social hubs, especially for women. The cafes really mapped out the city's new social geography.
But for pure leisure, the sources seem unanimous. It was all about the river, the Moray.
The Moray was absolutely central. The Neptun beach, built before the war, was the place to be. The sources are emphatic. Arad had the liveliest summer beach scene in the whole region, Transylvania, Banat, Partium. It was genuinely shared public fun.
And it created its own traditions.
Right.
Rowing clubs, swimming.
Yeah, the rowing clubs, hajos and hellas, and this great local tradition, the big circuit swim. People would swim downriver to the railway bridge, then walk back along the bank. That's real community identity built around the water. And all that public life kind of culminated each evening on the main drag, the Corso. The Corso.
The sources call it the defining feature of Arad in those years.
Absolutely. Being part of society meant strolling the Corso, that stretch between the Minorite Church and the Newman Palace. You had to be seen there, dressed up.
Sounds like the great social equalizer, almost.
In a way, yes, because despite all the divisions, walking the Corso cost nothing. It was the ultimate free stage, see and be seen, public life distilled.
And alongside the strolling, there was high culture. Concerts.
Still going strong, the Cultural Palace hosted big names. Strauss, Bartok, Georgianescu performed there. But, modern entertainment was really taking hold.
Cinema.
Cinema was becoming huge, especially with sound films arriving. The Corso Cinema opened in '31, and what really boosted its popularity? Hungarian films starring a local actor, Javor Pal. He became a massive star right as sound came in.
Interesting, though, that just as public life is thriving on the Corso and at the beach, technology starts pulling people back indoors. Radio becomes popular.
It does. It's a subtle shift. As more people could afford radios, social life starts migrating into the home. And Arad was actually innovative here. They set up the iron factory, making electrical and radio gear based on Tesla's patent.
Wow, local innovation.
Yeah, a little bright spot of technical progress amid all the turmoil.
But sadly, that recovery, that vibrancy,
Yeah.
it didn't last, did it?
Yeah.
The late 30s brought trouble again.
Yeah, the cycle turns again, political terror ramps up, the royal dictatorship, the violence of the Iron Guard. The atmosphere got really tense.
And minorities were targeted specifically.
Yes. The sources say the population, which had been relatively tolerant, was just bewildered by the anti-Jewish laws. Property confiscation, exclusion from jobs, from social life. This kind of targeted political fear was much more effective at killing public life than even the earlier economic shocks.
And the final blow, the Vienna Dictate.
That effectively shut things down. The Hungarian press was abolished, the theater closed, the sources described the streets just emptying out, cafes deserted, social life ground almost to a halt. People retreated indoors again, getting news mainly from the radio, from newspapers.
What a devastating end to that period of resilience.
It really is. Arad fights back from the shock of Trianon, rebuilds its public life over 2 decades. The clubs, the Corso, the businesses, only to have it all crushed again by political fear and the looming war.
It's such a powerful case study, isn't it? The fragility of it all.
It really shows how a sophisticated civil society, you see it in the factories, the clubs, the culture, how it fights to hold on to its identity against these huge shocks, administrative, legal, economic. But in the end, even that strong collective spirit couldn't withstand the targeted political terror.
Which brings us back to that little detail you mentioned earlier tucked away in the sources. About the old public baths, the Cime baths, and even brothels seeing less traffic.
Right. And the reason given, partly because more homes were getting bathrooms, and some sex workers were becoming, as the source puts it, freelance professionals.
So infrastructure and social norms changing things.
Exactly. The decline of those specific public spaces was linked to domestic improvements and shifting patterns. So thinking about Arad's whole story, how its recovery was so tied to public spaces, the Corso, the Neptun Beach, the clubs, It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
What does it suggest?
Well, it raises a question for you listening. What does Arad's cycle tell us about the resilience of public social life when new technology and infrastructure, whether it's home bathrooms or radio or, the internet today, increasingly pulls leisure into the private domestic sphere? Can that public vibrancy survive?
It really makes you think about your own community. What parts of its public life feel essential, resilient, and what might be the first things to fracture under pressure? That's definitely something to mull over. Thank you for diving into these fascinating and sometimes difficult sources with us today.